Hey everybody, welcome back. We've had a little bit of a summer break, but it's nice to see everyone again. And let's get the ball rolling. I'm going to hand it off to my co-host Jose, and I'm very excited for this presentation by Michael, but go ahead, Jose.
Thank you, Sarah. And yeah, I echo. It's nice to be back. I hope everyone had a good summer and going into a nice autumn winter session. So just a quick intro on Michael. He's a partner at Ingui Architect since 2000. Michael believes in creative collaboration and allows his artistic process to inform his designs, blending art and architecture to award-winning spaces and groundbreaking businesses. Michael is also the co-founder of BIA Interiors, an integrated and forward-thinking interior firm with Ingui Architecture. A leader in high-performance buildings, Michael is also the founder of the Passive House Accelerator and the co-founder of Source 2050. So with that, I'll give the floor to Michael. We have a great couple more steps on how to design a passive house. I'm excited about that.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. I'll share my screen, hopefully. All right, let's start with that. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
All right, well, let's jump in. So thanks for that intro. And as Jose mentioned, I'm with Ingui Architecture. We're a 23, 24 person firm in Manhattan that also has an integral BIA Interiors interior design firm. We do a lot of high-end residential. We also do some commercial work. We've done a lot of work in Manhattan and Brooklyn, but we do work in the tri-state area now. We probably have 10 projects out of the city. Houses, one commercial, a couple of retail stuff, but we do a lot of high-end residential. And because of that, Passive House fits what we do quite well. As mentioned, I'm the founder of the Passive House Accelerator, but as everybody knows, Zach Semke really runs the accelerator along with Kim and Kara and Jay and a whole team. And I'm just right now super happy just to be a part of it. It's really become quite fun. And same thing with Source. I've wanted a marketplace to exist forever, and Source is super fun and growing quickly. Shannon and Ilka are now on Source, but it's really run by John Knapp, and without it, it could never exist. I don't even have a login to Source. I couldn't tell you how it works, but I'm happy it does. So coming into the kind of work that we do, mostly, we do a lot of landmark work, a lot of high-end residential in Manhattan and Brooklyn, and a lot of it happens to be passive house work. A lot of it are houses that are at or beyond their shelf life, that are, 1880s, 1900s. So these are old houses that have had 3 or 4 lives, where the exterior might look quite historic and very nice, but the interior very often there's not a lot to keep. Sometimes we get to keep it though, which is really cool. And you'll see some of that in the presentations that I'm about to show. But in terms of why I do Passive House, I do it because it's just better building and it lets me do cool designs with big windows and other things that I just couldn't do otherwise. And it's what brought me here. And then I love the community. Some of the Passive House work that we've done, this is a multifamily project that Amy and Joey in the office just completed or are completing. We've got some punch list work, which is also a nice sort of Buildings of Excellence Award winner. So this is kind of a fun multifamily. But as you can see from the outside, this doesn't look like anything other than a typical restored older building. I mean, you can see the addition up top, but there's no bolt-on item. There's no flux capacitor on this building. It's a building. It's a nice building that people might want to live in and operate in. This is the Highland Passive House. We're doing this with Kathy Hobbs, upstate. Well, upstate for us, it's in Highland, New York. It's only a few hours up. And this is a really cool spot. Also a NYSERDA award winner. Very lucky to be in New York with NYSERDA. And that's the kind of projects that I do. And we've been really, really infatuated with creating a repeatable approach to doing Passive House, because otherwise it's too expensive. And we've been trying to customize our own 10 steps or so. But honestly, I wouldn't want to hear about this presentation from just me. Who cares what I think? I mean, we do high-end residential, and with high-end residential, the first thing people will say is, well, great, but anybody can afford that. But what's cool about what's happened is when we first did this about a year ago, we contacted about 50 or more really incredible architects, designers, passive house consultants that I've looked up to forever. First of all, they all got back to us, or most of them, quickly. And they all had 10 steps, easy. And what's also cool is a lot of the 10 steps were the same or similar. Sometimes not in the same order, but we're talking about affordable housing projects, market rate housing projects, custom homes, smaller homes, larger homes, retail facilities, a firehouse, a school. And what we're finding is that no matter what the building type is, people had similar steps with. So what this 10 steps, what it really is, it's us aggregating all that information. And then spoiler alert, when you do this kind of stuff in this community, everybody picks it apart, which I want you to do today. As you're in it, I would love to know, without interrupting, your 10 steps, or if we're missing one, or you want to expand on it. So obviously welcome to have questions, but also really welcome to have some additional steps or something we missed or something you might not necessarily fully agree with. Bring it on. That is how this 10-step setup really works well for the community, because it's really a cheat sheet and we should have one. I wished I had one when I started, and I'm really excited that this one exists. So bring it on. And with that, I will tell you that we actually have more than 10 steps, because a few people added some steps that I should have definitely had included at the beginning. So we're here to learn a little bit more about why you build a passive house. We're going to talk about what is a passive house, but we're really here for how do you build a passive house. I'm going to zoom through the first two because I could spend more than an hour on just those. But we'll talk a little bit about why. And for anybody who's seen me talk, you may be sick of seeing this slide, but I'm going to keep showing it because I like it a lot. And it's really me talking about the fact that although you've got the 5 principles of passive house that Zach talked about, and that we're going to talk about a little bit again in this presentation, I really don't think your client wants to hear about them. I mean, some people might, but honestly, it's a blah, 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 blah. Who cares? I'm going to get less in my house. I can't do what I want. I can't have what I want. I'm not going to hire you. I'm never building this. It just is what it is. You might be saying something more incredible than that, but sometimes people just don't want to know how the sauce is made. But if you told people that it's sealed from bugs and dust instead of airtight, that you get healthy filtered fresh air 24/7, just those 2 things, people did not know that they could have those. They just didn't know. They didn't know because sometimes you just don't know the questions to ask. Then you got the fact that you've got triple pane windows, at least in New York. 2 of those are laminated. So I've got security glass that creates a really quiet indoor environment. And then I've got warm walls and floors because I've built such a healthy, wonderful, kind of tight house that I don't need to heat these houses, which is bananas. So they get excited about this stuff. And that's what they want. They want the amenities, and they're sold. It goes from, I'm not hiring this guy, to, wow, how do I have that? And all of a sudden you get the job because other people aren't bringing up these things and they might not know how to do it. So just to come through it a little bit more, zooming around. A lot of people don't know what these walls look like. This is like 300 million years of paint. And this is what was behind it. I didn't get there fast enough. They already started fixing the brick, but they were removing these bricks by hand. This is like a raceway for everything that has more than 4 legs. And it just, and all sorts of other things. You put that kitchen exhaust fan on, 400, 600, 800 CFM, that's 800 cubic feet per minute leaving your house. It's got to come in from somewhere. Where do you think it's coming from? So it's really unhealthy. It's not great. And people just don't know it. So, they don't know how to ask you to fix it. And then the other cool thing that I like, just coming back into why we're really doing passive house in our office, is then I don't have radiators. I don't have lots of stuff that I don't want here. In fact, I have almost no mechanicals. The mechanicals are the air conditioning units that I would have put in anyway, and they provide some heat for when I need it. A week out of the year, maybe 2. So coming back into it, it really does help you create wonderful, cool spaces. This is a Lamelux skylight. They're coming on the accelerator soon. Someone can kind of put something in chat for that one. There's people coming up with all sorts of cool products. And for the kind of projects that we work on, those products are important and they help us do cool things. I've said this a lot, and anybody who's not doing passive house, that is doing high-end residential, is just doing it because they don't know what a passive house is yet. And then just some of the houses that we've done, this one is on the market right now. If anybody's interested and has the bucks, 17 million and in Brooklyn. And it's just bananas what these are going for. I mean, we could debate whether anybody should have a house that big, blah, 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 all that. But if someone is going to do those kind of projects, whatever kind of project you're going to do, there's just no reason to be passive, especially if you just simply want the best house there is. So just a little bit more on that one. It frees the designer. I've got no radiators. I've got no duct work. I can do big walls of glass. It ensures a happy client. Because of that, they're not looking at all these mechanicals, which is why I don't spend a lot of time talking about it. The mechanicals are simpler, not more difficult. They're kind of dumb. We've got historical surrounds. This is a Zola door installed way too tight. I'm sorry for the contractor on this one. I measured this with him, but it fits nicely. So you can do it in historic surroundings. And then from an architect's risk perspective, it de-risks the architect. And what do I mean by that? We bring our passive house consultant in early, and we're going to talk about that in the 10 steps. But on a typical project, I would not have included a passive house consultant. I wouldn't have had passive house planning packages or WUFI, depending on who you're using, where my drawings are getting put into these things where I no longer have to wonder, am I making it happen? Can I put big windows here versus there? Where do I put my insulation? How's my building going to perform? It de-risks it for the architect, and there's very few things in our life that de-risk our lives. We'll talk about that a little bit more. A little bit more on the contractor. For lots of reasons, we'll talk about that in the 10 steps. It de-risks life for the contractor if they do it right. One of the things that we recommend highly is hire the passive house consultant during construction to look at quality control before you do work and after you're doing work. The passive house end of this isn't that long in the construction cycle. It doesn't take that many meetings, and it ensures you get it right the first time. Just working a little bit more through that, if I have to do a passive house planning package or a WUFI package, I'm doing good details, because honestly, PS and PHI, they don't want to see bad details. They want to see real details. So that also de-risks it for the contractor and the architect, because it's forcing us to confront details and drawings that we wouldn't have maybe done otherwise. And then contractors get to build the things they want to, which is great. So what is a passive house? I'm really going to zoom through these because I really could spend 10 minutes on each one of them. So if anybody wants to know more about these, we could talk about it another time, but this is the same thing that Zach talked about. It's the 5 points, but for our projects. This is a cellar slab. That's some Stego wrap, creating that layer below the slab. This one's connecting to Stowe Gold. There's no term bar on this yet, but there would be. It's basically a big pool liner. Below that is some gravel, 4 inches of insulation, or there's another product out there called Glavel, which combines those two, which is kind of cool. And that can connect to a smart membrane on the exterior walls. This is a party wall. Actually, it's a cellar wall. But once we get up top, the party wall will continue with that. We'll see that in a second. But on the exterior walls, it could be a smart membrane. And this is Intello, but Stowe. You have a lot of other products. Proclima, this is a Proclima product. Siga, Artel, a whole bunch of cool companies make this now. This is a project where we were able to keep the crown. We were able to keep the joists. So you can do all this stuff and not get rid of stuff, kind of getting back into our embodied carbon conversation. How much do I really want to rebuild and how to remove from these projects? This is a little bit more about that airtight layer. Here's that Stego wrap coming through. This does have the term bar. This is Stowe with Stowe Gold with rapid seal. This is either a Partel or a Proclima product. It's now coming in white. It's sequencing it right. This is the front and rear wall being tied together on this old house. They put the liquid applied on first. It's vapor open. Rapid seal, which is still a product use of choice around old joists, which have been sanded a little bit. Notice the brick is repaired. Repair your brick before you do this stuff. Nobody's seen this stuff for a long time. A lot of this is at its shelf life. So when you see some open joints, fix the open joints. So we're really talking about just creating this really nicely sealed envelope. Then you could choose how you get your fresh air. You could open the windows, all the windows. In my house, we leave the windows open all the time, but you get to choose how you do it. In this particular project, we're using a combination of rock wool and blown-in cellulose. You can kind of see it here. No thermal bridges. You learn stuff in life that you just never did right. And I'd say these are the aha moments with contractors. This is the front wall of a house. Here's that front wall. How do you get the joists not to act like cold weather radiators, where the cold just radiates right through into your subfloor, into this, where the radiator that sits there is doing a lot just to 40 or 50% of its job is just heating up the materials because the cold is coming through. Honestly, a simple, dumb piece of insulation. Now, this is showing a piece of insulation, the first joist tied to that front wall still with a small thermal bridge, which is wood. Now they have some really great structural foam, so we wouldn't have had to do this. Another combination of just smart contracting. This is Owen Clean who did this one. Most of the joists are this deep. Next couple of joists, we purposely made them a little shallower so we can get this wood blocking in. So you can tie in the exterior walls and still just not have metal to metal. So you're having to remove those thermal bridges. High performance windows and doors. We use these on all of our projects, even non-passive houses. This is a before. We actually pulled this attic back. We did not remove those floor joists. We didn't remove our subfloor or our joists. We actually refinished our subfloor in place. But you can kind of see that white wall back there. That's the same white wall as this. We wanted to create this incredible view of the city. These are all Zola windows and doors. It operates really well, but I don't know if you can tell, but it's a lot of glass and there's no radiators. The grill is behind us right there. And honestly, we're just not designing for heat anymore in New York. We're just designing for cooling. These are north facing, which we're really happy about. That window does get some solar gain. But again, I knew I wasn't going to get exterior shading on that window, and we could send it through our PHPP, and we knew what we had to do. We knew what we had to spec on that glass. We knew what we had to do with some internal shading, and we designed for it. I wasn't guessing. And again, de-risking for the architect is so important. Filtered fresh air. This is my house. It's not my roof deck, but this is my house. It's my filter. I live near a highway and my air inside the house is super clean. This is what I'm not breathing in. 4 times a year, we filter this out. This is a Zender system. And it provides a number of filtered fresh air changes every day. Whole house filtered air, fresh air changes. Our clients just don't know that exists. And just getting into mechanicals a little bit, this house is a passive house. By the way, this house is a passive house with an elevator, and it's a big house with a lot of fun things. You can do a passive house of any kind you want. This monstrous house, those little 2 Mitsubishi units are doing all the heating and cooling. And this house, again, doesn't really need heat. So it's really doing the cooling. It has a dehumidifier as well. This is a house next door that's the same size. They get a roof deck because they don't need all this stuff. And in New York City, that's worth a lot of money, like a lot. So anyway, it's another reason why our clients like doing passive houses. So how do you build a passive house? How do you start? How do you ensure you're successful? Which is the #1 reason for this presentation, because I would never have done my first passive house if I ever thought there was a possibility of it not being successful. It's just too risky. I did my first passive house next to a house that Ken Levinson was the architect for, and Sam McAfee was the contractor for. And I was all over them the whole time they were doing it. Really, Sam. I was just meeting with Sam, making fun of him the whole time, telling him his house wasn't going to work. And I had 12 tons of cooling. He had 3. I didn't even know what an ERV was at the time. And I was doing in-floor heating, and I had all these complicated systems. He didn't have any of those things. And afterwards, we hired him, and Sam was my mentor. This is going to come up because Tessa brings it up as one of her points.
Somebody comment, Charlie? No.
You got to mute. Thanks. Anyway, but unless it was like, you go, Mike. But anyway, or Sam, because this is really Sam's moment. But I had a mentor, and it really saved me. I would never have done it. Couldn't have paid me enough. It's too risky. You got to get your projects right. How do you ensure your client's excited? And what are the 10 steps to doing your first passive house? Although we actually added a few. So I want to say something before I really get into this. These are really easy steps. And they're really easy when you do them in order. And I know these steps because I helped create this presentation along with Kirsten, who's probably on this. But I don't follow them sometimes, and you really get snagged. There's nothing magical about this. There's nothing crazy about this, but it's the way you do it, and it's the order you do it in that starts to make it super easy. And the first one, which we talked about already, is how do you get your client on board? And I really do think it's focusing on the amenities. I really do. Your client gets excited. When you say you can have a building that's filtered, fresh air 24/7 and sealed from bugs and dust, like, I want the dirty house. I want the unclean house. Yeah, give me that one. I want the house that needs all the heat versus no heat. And what I'm excited about is when we got our quotes back from everybody, we got this great quote from John, which shows you even on a project so incredible like this is an affordable housing project, there could be nothing more different than some of the houses I just showed you than this really beautiful, successful building. And it's the same exact thing. He's looking at it the same exact way and talking about the products that are needed, that it's a more rigorous way. The products needed are readily available, and you can do it. Ed May, who's the Passive House consultant we've used on a lot of projects, just understanding it's something that you do, not something you buy. Again, we're not bolting on lots of extra items. There's not a lot of additional maintenance. In fact, there's less maintenance, which is why this client decided to do it. Getting into this project with Robert Tefera, which was his first passive house. This is a LEED Platinum passive house. It was Manhattan's first passive house. And most people in Manhattan who are familiar with this project are only familiar with the fact that we rebuilt and restored the stoop that had been removed in the early 30s. But that's a passive house door. These are passive house windows, Zola. And I think what he's describing is just making sure you understand and the client understands that when you implement these houses, they're just better. Derek Tillman, again, another beautiful project, great developer, and describing it from a completely different vantage point. I'm describing it, how do I convince my client to do it? He's talking about it from a very different standpoint. He's talking about it with his quote from a standpoint of a developer. How am I going to talk about this with funding? How am I going to talk about this with other people who want to do other projects with me? And how does this make me a more attractive developer who's developing these buildings? So again, very similar points. I'm harping on this one a little bit because without this point, you don't build a passive house. You just don't. I cannot tell you. I've gotten this wrong before. I talk about, oh, the money we can save, the planet we're going to save, and people just assume you're going to get less. They do. They just do. Next is bringing on your passive house consultant and certifying bodies early and use them as a tool. This is super important, and this is the de-risking factor, and it's number 2 for a reason. It's not number 8. It's number 2. It's bring them in schematic design. James Trainer, another great architect. Remember the certification body early, bring them in early. FIAS, PHI, they've seen it all. They're on a lot of projects. Whatever complicated thing you just had on your project, which makes your house not certifiable or too difficult, they've seen it. And they can provide real-time feedback, even if you have a passive house consultant. And bringing your passive house consultant in early allows you to do things like not go backwards. People say, oh, is passive house more expensive? Does it take more time? Yeah, it really does if you have to go backwards. But if you can follow these steps, it really doesn't cost that much more. And just going backwards is so dangerous. I'll give you an example. You show a client a really cool project, really cool design. House is situated this way if it's freestanding or if it's not. With one of my projects, I've got big windows here, but not there. Then I meet with my passive house consultant like 2 months later. I realized, Mike, no, you can't do that. I don't care how much shading I have on it. But if you did this, you could. Well, if I had known that earlier, I probably would have designed it that way. And my client would have seen it that way. And I'm not going backwards. So it's number 2 for a reason. Number 3, involve the contractor as early as possible. Again, another good quote from John that I was super happy to see. The way we do our projects, we like to bring contractors in at the end of schematic design, which I can do in the kind of projects that we're on. I like to work as a design build without being a design build. Different contractors for different things. But what we'll do is we'll bring contractors in at the end of schematic design. We'll get 4 budgets and we'll hopefully pick a contractor from there. But as anybody knows, you're very often always over budget, and you're missing something, and you got to do something. Finding that out early is great. 1, 2, you get to develop the project with them. But when I saw this quote from John, who's definitely doing completely different scale of work than we're doing, he's probably bringing the contractor in as a consultant or something because they're definitely doing the bid process, which you need to do on a building like this. He's using the contractor the same way we're talking about, and it really helps you vet the details and make sure it's buildable. And again, it brings those costs down. Tourette Collaborative, same kind of thing. Bringing them all in early, describing to the subs what's different about a passive house, how simple it still can be, showing them some examples, some visuals, so that everybody understands that this isn't something too crazy. It gets people pretty excited. And May, again, everybody has to be on board. You're bringing people on, people are excited, people want to do it, and you're all set. And include the build team early helps you detail better. Some contractors like to use wood studs, some like metal, some like Proclima, some like Stowe, some like Sega. Who knows? I couldn't tell you. Some like Mitsubishi, some like Daikin, some do their own ductwork, some don't. You just never know. And when you get the sense of what they like and dislike, you can custom tailor the set to them. And honestly, this is not a passive house thing. You do work like that, and your jobs are going to be tighter, happier, because people are going to want to build what they wanted to build, and your pricing is going to go down. So the next one is creating air sealing, mechanical ventilation, and hot water strategies early. And I will say that some of the people who gave me comments on this were definitely pointed to me, because I think this is something I could always do better. You know, just because you're doing a passive house and you need less mechanicals doesn't mean that I don't have to include some mechanicals and make sure I have space for them in my designs. Also, starting with ventilation early, and making sure that you have ventilation even in your passive houses, just making sure that they really work well, and make sure that you're starting the conversations with the client early. I don't have a quote in here from Craig from the ROS group, but I quote him a lot, and I haven't taken credit for it yet, but I think I'll start doing so soon. Craig has a whole presentation that he talks about on massive projects, where it's start at the end with the client. And with the client, what you want to do is you want to ask them, what does the thermostat look like to you? You know, how do you like it cold? Do you like it hot? Do you want to see it on your phone or don't you? And you start to ask questions about what they want mechanically. And all of a sudden, you can then custom tailor it all to them before you even brought the mechanical engineer on. I mean, we like to include our consultants in that conversation because they're fun, but you get to really learn a lot from them about what they want. And it's really helpful. And then you can start to get into the performance with the clients. And the clients then start to really get into it. A couple of things you'll see on this. Actually, not the most perfect slide in the universe. Don't pick it apart. But one of the things that you'll see is even with induction ranges, we're including a little bit of exhaust in those. When we do gas ranges, which we do in our passive houses, we're not, whether people feel like we should be or not, and I'm not the kind of person who feels like I should tell people what to do. I feel like I'm the kind of person who should tell people the best thing they can do with what I can convince them to do. We try to convince people to do induction, but some people won't give up the gas. So if they're going to do gas and they're going to do a passive house, I'm going to make sure you have makeup air. Not so there's different things you can do, but learning those lessons early and just making sure it is what it is. This is the project you're on, and creating a strategy that works is really, really important. This is Max Michelle, who did my house. But this is also a quote from Kevin, making systems work for you. There's a lot of companies out there that have complete air sealing systems and strategies, and working with a whole systematic approach will make your life a lot easier. So, you know, I think you're going to get the point that I haven't really talked a lot about like heavy passive house stuff yet. This is just better building. This is just a better sequence of operations. And this seems like really dumb as a number 5, but I can't tell you how not dumb it is. Create a clear drawing set and specification package. I just think we all kind of take it for granted. I know I do, especially when I'm working with the same builder over and over and over again. Having to go through the certification makes you complete that set. It makes you complete those details that you thought everybody just kind of knew about. And yeah, of course we'll get it right. But it helps you really, really understand that. And it saves a lot of time, which saves a lot of money in the end. And Stuart Hood, who's given us a couple of really good quotes, really brings that home as well on the larger scale and on the HVAC end of it here. And he's not wrong. You really want to get these passive houses to work for you. And if you're not really completing those drawings and not really maximizing how they can really benefit you, honestly, you can have a building, forget about passive house. You can have any building, just cost a lot more. It's just expensive to fix it during construction. Kramer has a lot of quotes in here. He doesn't have a lot of other quotes because they were quite colorful and incredibly helpful. But This is him again, making sure range hoods, makeup air, dehumidifiers, humidifiers, hot water heater, just really kind of like getting into it. And then again, keeping it simple. You still have to do a proper heat load calc. You still have to just kind of make sure you get it right. Just, gonna go back to the basics. Do a real hot water calc. Don't get too excited, in my opinion, about minimizing your mechanicals so much that if someone's having a party or something else, it's not going to work. People live in these houses. You need to make sure they work, even though they are passive houses. I think everybody knows Shannon, but another really good one. I think, and Shannon's done a lot of prefab work where a lot of this comes in even more, but just making sure that these drawings really take into account those thermal bridging strategies and are really defining the materials and so forth. Sarah Bayer, sorry, I always mess up. At some point, I've known Sarah forever and I keep saying it wrong. Nobody gets Ingui right either. But anyway, Sarah Bayer does a lot of, honestly, just beautiful projects, and same kind of thing. The extra time you need to explain it to the GC is 100% worth it. And the GC has to understand what they're getting into as well, which will really help them. And then finally, with Mark, who's in our office and does a lot of our detailing and so forth for our office, develop them so they're easy to read. Don't overcomplicate things, which I think our community likes to do, but there are a lot of really simple systems. Keep it simple. There's just no reason not to. So hold a kickoff meeting with your contractor. We've been doing this for a really long time. I'm happy that this quote is here with Amy. She was one of the first architects. She's a principal at the office. She did Engine 16 too, who did one of these kickoff meetings with us. You'll see this as a quote from Owen Colleen, the contractor as well. You got to get everybody on board, and the kickoff meeting is super helpful. It gets everybody into it. I'm telling you, a lot of contractors don't want to show up to them. A lot of contractors where you've done work with them before in the Passive House, maybe some of their subs haven't, and it just gets everybody on the same page. It's really, really important. Here's Owens. It's right away. There you go. So people will stress out about whether they really understood it or not, or they'll walk in not knowing what it is, or they'll not walk in not caring. But I can tell you, like after that kickoff meeting, everybody on that job, they're bragging about what they're working on to somebody. They're super excited. They can't wait to like get into it. They're starting to follow everybody on Instagram. And then they're picking it apart and then telling us all the better ways you can do whatever we drew, which is great. So I feel like getting everybody excited about it is really, really important. And that's a great quote from Tim Spittler as well. R. Sutton, this was their first passive house, by the way. And Tim did this. He showed up to a bunch of our contractor collectives. Tim's not on here now. He's been on a lot. He's on the accelerator all the time. But he also surrounded himself with great subs who ensured, including Kevin Brennan, who was his air sealing sub for this, where the subs made sure that he did a good job. And there's a lot of good people out there and a lot of help through the community. Hold weekly meetings with your client. Again, sorry that these are boring, but they're easy. And so you should follow them. And the weekly meeting is the secret sauce. And I swear to God, I don't care if it's not architecture, if you're doing a school project. The same 3 boring questions. What did you do last week? What do you plan to do this week? And what do you need from anybody over the next 2 weeks? If you do that, your job will stay on track. Your project will stay on track. If you don't, someone's not going to know what's going on. Someone's going to be confused about something. Some detail's going to get lost. And very often projects are delayed because people are not getting the contractors what they need in time. And it doesn't feel very collaborative. Be clear with yourself and everyone about the project. Graham Irwin. I think this, they really do get excited. They know what they're doing, and making sure everybody understands, like, we're not only building a really cool house here or building or school or whatever you're doing, but this is next level stuff. This is stuff that everybody will be doing this soon, and you're doing it now. It gets everybody really excited. Using the blower door as a tool during construction, as well as after construction. Here you got Kevin Brennan, who's like, really, honestly, this is Kevin's rule. This is Andrew Fishman with John Mitchell, different projects. This is actually a project where we were doing the blower door initially before we even started the job. We had like 15 air changes on that job. It's now way below 1. So We use a blower door as a tool on all of our projects now. I don't know why anybody wouldn't. On the best projects with the best contractors who have been doing passive house, we find holes all the time. And why wouldn't you want to see them at the end, before the end? And why wouldn't you want to try? And it doesn't take that long. And it's super, super helpful. So using them as a tool and really working at it makes the most sense. So commissioning the building. This seems like a basic concept, but I think we'd all be surprised at how often people don't commission the buildings. I'll use me as an example. I moved into my house before it was done. That's what I do. I break my own rules. And we didn't commission our HVAC or our ERV for like a year. I cannot tell you how much better they worked. This is James Trainer, making sure that, he's talking about it. This is a multifamily project, making sure to allow for that time to commissioning, make sure the contractor knows they've got to do it, make sure it's in the schedule. It makes a difference. And this is, I think everybody knows John. John did the commissioning for my house. And my house just worked so much better after commissioning. What do we mean by commissioning? If people don't know, they're balancing your HVAC, they're looking at your fan speeds, they're looking at your ERV, they're making sure each register does what it's supposed to do, and it makes sure that your house just works well. So certifying the project. I get asked this question all the time. Do I have to certify the project? And honestly, maybe the answer is no, but I can tell you the difference between a certified project and a non-certified project is you're taking out a key piece. And John describes it perfectly here, that without the rigor that comes from the third party, you just have the ability to cut corners here or there. One. Two, I feel like as the architect and builder or passive house consultant, when you're on the job, you're not sending it to that third party before anybody swung a hammer. And remember what I said about going backwards. They're looking at it. They're like, no, you're going to have a thermal bridge here. Or, hey, no, you missed that spot right there. It's huge. And you're taking pictures and you're sending them stuff. It's really, really important. It makes a really, really big difference. And I think that the cost of certifying pays for itself in the lack of delays and lack of issues that you might have on the project after. Big piece of advice, take a lot of photos during construction. They're going to want to see them. So that was the 10 steps. But I can't tell you how many emails that we got or I got about the things that we missed. And they're obvious when you see them because I haven't mentioned embodied carbon or what you want to do. And in this particular case, Chris Magwood has a great quote: use less stuff, use better versions of the same stuff, move and build new stuff in cleaner ways, and make stuff circular. Chris is great. We've got another person, Jacob Rakusin. I think you all know him as well. And we just have so many abilities now, even more now than we had before. There are a lot of products out there. There are a lot of techniques people have been developing. We're an emerging market. Everybody's developing cool stuff every day where we now can really do this. We can really think about embodied carbon while we're thinking about these better boxes that we're building. We can do it. And then it comes at a good time. And the team can put a chat in this. The next conference that's coming up in the accelerator is how to decarb. And we're going to be talking about all those things. It's coming up soon. They can put something in chat. You should register for it. If you ever wanted to level up your knowledge, like instantly in 4 hours of how to do this, and even if you knew how to do it, or even if you know how to do it, because I just saw some of these folks speak, and you want to know like what they're doing now, which is totally cool. Register for the conference. It's not that much money, and it's amazing how much we're going to get from this. The next one came from an in-person talk I gave at a Brick and Wonder event where I was accosted afterwards by both Michelle and Maria, who I love, and who have since been on the accelerator. If anybody want to put a link to that, we're both in interiors, and they're like, "But Mike, you're missing like an important part. All these houses are really so tight." By the way, it's not just passive houses. You spray foam a house, you're still tight enough. We got to start thinking about what we're putting on the interiors. And what's nice is there are a lot of people and a lot of companies that are now listing the low VOC ratings and so forth, where you can choose that stuff. Is it off-gassing? What are my interiors like? I have to tell you, it was one of my favorite conversations I've had, and we were super excited to have them on the accelerator, and we'll probably have them on again. Both really knowledgeable people. But wait, there's more. There's a 13th step, even though it's an unlucky number. We'll call it lucky 13, because I went to a kick-ass conference on Friday, and the whole time I'm there, I'm like, what a loser. I did not mention any of the cool regenerative or biophilic things that people are doing now, and they are doing them, and it can be done. And I'm not a big fan of bringing up stuff in these things where like, oh, great, Mike, sounds good. That'll be out in 5 years. How am I going to use that today? Or you search the internet, you can't find anything. But these are people who are doing. They're implementing. And again, we're already building the better boxes. So we can do these things now. And so again, starting to consider this is super important. This is Sebastian, who I think you all know, but he's also been on the accelerator and will be on again. So some great work here. So, and by the way, that was a great conference. I was going to stay for like 2 or 3 sessions because I had deadlines and I just couldn't leave. So tips and tricks. I'm going to go through this fast because I'm talking too long. You can read it. But it's just getting your HVAC right, making sure you get it right, making sure you're including all of it, making sure that the client is giving you what they're looking for at the beginning, making sure you can really embrace the fact that Passive House windows are incredible. You get to do all these cool things with them. They perform almost as well as a typical wall in a typical house. So you get to do stuff, especially when you shade them. This is one of my favorite Stuart Hood quotes, where he says, I often say the greatest advance in HVAC technology in the last 10 years has been the Passive House window. And it's not just the Passive House window. When you hear him talk about this, it's the Passive House window and the shading and getting that right. We are not designing for heating anymore, and it's going to get hotter. It doesn't matter what we all do. We all know it. So designing for this now really lowers your HVAC needs. And then this is from me, just because I get asked this all the time. You know, you got this great window, just make sure you install it right. There's so many good techniques, there's so many videos out there, so many great products out there that allow you to do it. Other quick ones, getting the air barrier right, working with your team the way you want to, and bring them in. Use the methods and products that you know work. I'm going to spend a second on this one. It's one that I do all the time. We are in an emerging market. There's always going to be something better coming out tomorrow. This community continuously picks itself apart, and we tell everybody what we like and dislike. And then those manufacturers are smart enough to listen to us. And you just can't get caught up in it. You're still on a deadline. Your client still needs to move into that house, and you still need to finish. So just work with the things you know work. It's still going to outperform everything in the universe. It's going to be an incredible home or building. Commit yourself to being a change maker. Again, another great quote from Derek. It will not be easy, but it's totally worth it. And it is. Once people get into it, they're just hooked. Sarah Buyer, there you go. Make it exciting, because it is. And then you have to remember, even this is your 10th, it's exciting for everybody who's in it. Make sure it stays that way. Tessa, find a mentor. I really would never have done it if I didn't. For anybody who's on the Passive House Accelerator, you have a community of mentors here. Use it. It didn't exist when I started. It exists now. There's somebody who's got to live close enough to you, and everybody likes to share. River Architects, start the conversation with future architects early. They cannot unlearn these lessons. And then my last quote, and then I'm done, I promise, is welcome to our inspired, committed community by Graham Irwin. And I have always loved this quote because it's one of the things that I've loved about being in the Passive House community. Almost everything we've done in our houses, I've learned from somebody else because they openly shared it. Some of these people are people I compete with. We now share with people I compete with again. It just, this community does that. And this is a great segue for after this, Zach. Maybe it'd be a good time to spend just a minute on what we're doing with the accelerator to even expand that community and expand that ability to have mentors. It makes such a huge difference. Coming back to that initial thing, I think we have to ensure that we're all successful when we do these things. So having a cheat sheet of the 10 steps, even if they're basic, and remembering them is important, but also having mentors who can help you in real time really make it happen. Because you know how it is. You start a project. Is it really going to go that way? Maybe not. There's always something that comes up, and we've got a community of people who love to help. With that, thank you very much.
Nice job, Michael. That was
Thank you.
awesome. If Jose, if it's okay, I'll take Michael's invitation here and just mention a couple things about the community that we are working on. And so we're doing a soft launch of this that we're going to be sharing on our mailing list next week. So when you go to next week, when you go to reimaginebuildings.com, this will be entirely different with an updated page and instructions on how to join the Reimagine Buildings Collective. And then at the Reimagine Buildings How to Decarb conference on October 18th, that's when we're going to do a bigger formal launch of the community. So a bit about like what we're up to with the Reimagine Buildings Collective. The point of this is to bring together building professionals who are ready to step up and tackle climate change. And we're bringing this community together to create the healthiest buildings with the smallest carbon footprint, to deliver them cost effectively and as headache-free as possible, to be able to sell their benefits so they actually get built, and to make a good living while doing it. And the kind of the why behind this community is that, I mean, as you know, at the Accelerator for the last 5 years, we've been doing, hundreds of articles and videos and podcast episodes and Zoom events like this, diving into lessons learned and pitfalls to avoid around building decarbonization. And we'll continue to do this work. It's been an amazing journey, and we're super excited about what's ahead. And what we've noticed is that there isn't a good platform for professionals like all of us to connect with one another on an ongoing basis. So we have, it's kind of episodic, right? We'll have these connections at events, and then in between, there's kind of relative isolation, especially if you're in a small firm or you're a solo practitioner. So that's why we've built the Reimagine Buildings Collective. And what's inside the collective is, as you can see, experts in residence. So you'll be able to access leading building decarbonizations and get your burning questions answered in weekly Ask Me Anything sessions. We'll also have cohort-based courses. So everything from learning to sell your first low carbon, high performance building project to clients, or I saw in chat the question around how to convince teams, so to other team members, to a 0 to Hero course taught by Ed May that will equip you with the Passive House modeling expertise to actually be able to model and consult on your first paying project. And free admission to the Reimagine Buildings conference series throughout the year, and access to our Reimagine Buildings podcast. So there's a lot there, but the most important thing is the access to the Reimagine Buildings Collective forum, which we've built on this AI-powered software that really puts peer-to-peer connection front and center, so that we can share stories and experiences and tackle obstacles together. So we know this is tough work sometimes, that clients and project teams can be skeptical or even resistant, that these projects can get complicated, and when they're complicated, they can be costly to you, and that there are a lot of pitfalls out there that we're all navigating together. And so it's the notion here is that all of that is easier to do when you do it together. So that's why we built the Reimagine Building Collective, the Reimagine Buildings Collective, and we hope you'll join us. And you'll be able to do that as early as next week. Sorry, that was a little long-winded. We're super excited about it. I'll stop. So Jose, you're up.
Okay, thank you, Zach. So we are getting close to the top of the hour, so I think I'll pass it on to Kim so we can run through our usuals, and then we'll go to the Q&A.
Great. I will run through these events real quick, Zach, and then I'll hand off to you to just thank our sponsors quickly, if that's okay. Starting off with our Accelerator Partner of the Week, we'd like to thank Walsh Construction Company for their support. Our podcast episode this week features some familiar faces. We have Michael Ingui, Zach Semke, and myself speaking about all these exciting things we have going on at the Accelerator. So be sure to check that out. Let me just put all these links in chat for you. There we go. Next up, we have a live project, next we have a component spotlight event tomorrow featuring Lamelux. They'll be joining us to introduce a brand new modular skylight. This is the first time it's available in North America. So we hope to see you tomorrow. Link in chat to register for that event. Next week, we have a project of the month featuring the Cross Cabin project based in Austin, Texas. And we'll be joined by design build practitioner George Esparza. Next up, a reminder that the FIAS Proform is coming up about 19 days away. This is taking place in Providence, Rhode Island. So I hope to see you there. I know a lot of Accelerator folks will be joining. And next we have the Building Energy New York City conference coming up October 24th. This one is in person. And I'm going to hand off to Zach to speak a little bit about how to decarb our conference coming up October 18th.
I think in the interest of time, and we've mentioned it before, I think Michael spoke about it. So it's going to be a great conference. And as you can see, really fantastic speakers. So we hope you'll join us on the 18th. Cool. And so while I have the floor, I will do some thank yous to the fine organizations that make everything here at Passive House Accelerator possible. So a big thank you to our stakeholder partner, NYSERDA, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. Thank you to our founding sponsors, 475 High Performance Building Supply, Ingui Architecture, Partel, Rockwell North America, and Zola Windows. Thanks as well to our champion sponsors, Bewizo, Icon Windows and Doors, Intelligent Membranes, PH Air Seal, and Source 2050. And thanks to our patron sponsors, Brennan, Holstrom System, Innotech Windows and Doors, Lamelux, Longboard, RDH Building Science, and Sanderson Sustainable Design. Thank you, sponsors.
All righty, thank you so much, sponsors. Gotta love that. We have some questions. I know Kim just kind of put the little Q in the chat. We totally invite you to unmute and ask your question when it's your turn, if you would like to do that. If you are not on the call anymore, or if you just don't really want to do that, that's totally fine. Jose or myself will just ask Michael your question for you. And I'm going to start. So Michael, I'm going to start with Chris S.N. Andover. I don't think he's on the call anymore. Chris, totally feel free to interrupt me if you are on the call and would like to ask your question. Awesome.
Here. Sorry, I just changed my last name. Wonderful presentation. For a building that's highly vertical, let's say 2-car garage on the ground floor, 2 floors of living space above that, there should be a stack effect. And I'm wondering if there's anything that mixes the hot upper air with the cooler lower air internally, kind of, just a blower fan. And also for other air quality considerations, like if the bedrooms are on the 2nd floor, the carbon dioxide concentration could rise, and would internal fresh air be brought in without relying on an external exchange? Thanks.
Yeah, good questions. Great questions. The first question is the answer is yes. The stack effect's real, and it should be taken advantage of. And we have a funny name for it in the office, the Baxtifier, but it's because my partner name is Ben Baxt, and he's been doing it forever, way before Passive House. And it is a simple 4-inch duct that goes from the bottom to the top with a simple fan that can run at a low velocity. And it can either steal in the air from below or steal in the hot air from above, and just circulating that air to the lower floors so that you get the free air. Like, why wouldn't you do this? It's not expensive. It's super easy, and you can use a small duct. So we do it all the time. John Mitchell and Ed May have on our front have kind of made that detail a little bit better and gotten a bit better of an inline fan. But we've done lots of different types of fans with it, and kind of simple, and you should take advantage of it. That's one. And then two, we haven't had that issue with the carbon. The ERVs circulate so much air, and you can, and we have sometimes requested balancing those so that they work a specific way if we were concerned about it. But we haven't had that issue. And I can tell you some of our projects, mine included, I mean, I test my house a lot, just for carbon dioxide and see like what's happening in a way that I think annoys some people, that I live with. But door closed, door open. What if I unplug the recirc on my hot water heater? But but there's no better way to find out. And yeah, I personally haven't had that issue. I do not think I'm the most qualified person on this call to answer that though.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. I think you've explained it really well. And I love that idea. I'm going to steal it for my projects.
I would too.
Yeah. Next up would be Saina B.
Hi, I'm just connected via two different things. So I think for me, my background is Pakistani and I'm in northern Pakistan. When I went to visit, I saw a lot of like old palaces that use passive house techniques, which is vernacular architecture, basically, right?
Mhm.
I know that you said that like passive house is basically informed by vernacular architecture in a lot of ways. I find it, and I did my thesis on it, and I'm trying to understand it better. I'm not super well aware of Passive House, so please correct me if I'm wrong.
Mhm.
But I just want to see, like, I know it's contextual. Like, say that area was a desert area, and so for ventilation, for sunlight, instead of having windows on the walls, they would have windows on the roof.
Mhm.
And then the way that the material was used was because they wouldn't have add-on appliances like fans, or they wouldn't have any other sort of like insulation techniques. The material was the insulation itself. So
Mhm.
like how nowadays with insulation, like more healthier insulation such as mycelium, like you think about those things as like, okay, yeah, this is a good way to cut the basic cookie cutter house insulations that we typically use. Instead of that, use this or use a material that self-insulates. So like I guess what I'm still trying to understand in my question in that capacity, but I'm trying to see how in different contexts, like you create these structures by these informed decisions and informed techniques that were there back in the day. So then how does passive house differ from that? Is it that it's like a hybrid between the vernacular architecture and the technology in terms of the material that we found out and the different techniques that we found out to be more successful, and then bring it and culminate it as passive house techniques? Is that what it is?
First of all, you go with the great question. And great question. Sometimes what happens on the accelerator is people come up with a question, and as they're doing it, I'm like, we should do a session on that. And this is one of them, because I'm not going to answer it completely here. It'd be impossible. But I will say that I mean, this kind of reminds me of, like, for example, my partner and some other people who make fun of the term passive house, because back in the day, they did passive houses that were passive, meaning they didn't use mechanicals. And the whole passive solar movement was that way as well. But there were people way before this, hundreds of years before this, that passively did things with thick walls, with the right color material, with the properly placed ventilation. So I think that in some areas, like New York, where I do have winters, and I do have humidity, and some of the other items where we can now mitigate that, we probably have to use mechanicals, and that's where the passive house helps. But there are other areas where, I mean, and there are definitely architects who are doing this kind of work, which is why we should do a session on this. Because I'm a big fan of looking at people who are doing versus people like me right now who are answering this in a more general way. So I love this as a future session, but they're doing this, and what they're looking at is proper shading, which is what they did back in the day. They made sure they weren't getting the direct sun where they didn't want it. And looking at proper wall thicknesses and making sure you're getting that right. And then for me, like with my projects, because a lot of them are historic, I'm constantly asking myself, how much of this house do I have to remove? I mean, the best way to deal with embodied carbon is just not to remove it. And then honestly, some houses should never be certified passive. They're beautiful, old, and wonderful. So the only thing I'm asking myself there is, how much can I remove to get rid of the heat? And not destroy too much of this house. So it's never going to be passive, but I'm going to take everything I've learned from these things. But you're asking it from a completely different standpoint. How much mechanicals do I really need to put in that building to get it to where I want? And yeah, I think it's cool. I'd love to hear more about the thesis, but I also, you know, somehow put your contact in chat so Zach and Kim can get to you. But I feel like this is a great future session.
I also have another question. Sorry, I don't want to take too much time, but whenever I've read and thought about Passive House, and whenever I've thought about, oh, you know, when we design, like I mentioned on the chat, that you design for the more predicted weather, that, oh, you know, 350 days, this is how it is. This is how it's been. Like London, for instance, it's typically there's not that much like, you know, added like ACs and stuff. So
Mhm.
when heat wave hits, 10
Oh, yeah.
days of that is terrible, or
Yeah.
most of Europe for that matter. So
Mhm.
like when you design, yes, you use climate consultant and all the other like, you know, ways to figure out, okay, this is how the light comes, this is how we're gonna understand to build this specific way. But for the erratic weather, like what is, I know this isn't really a answer yet because none
No,
of us
but
sort of,
I get the question, and it's a good one.
it's like, how do we think of it? Because my dad has an architecture firm in Pakistan, and whenever we do vernacular methods, because it's still developing as a country,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So it's still like a lot of concrete and cement and brick usage and local, you know, sustainable, not trying to greenwash, but sustainable practices that we add to the way that we build. But at the same time, it's like when all these offsetting 10, 15 days of weird weather happens,
Mhm.
that destroys it all. Or like Houston for Buffalo, like the park,
Yeah.
millions spent and then millions spent again to fix it. Like how I get non-porous and porous material usage and everything, but I don't know what the solution would be.
Yeah, it's a whole resiliency conversation, which I think depends on where you are. And again, another good
Context.
session.
Mhm.
So you go twice, but I think the resiliency question is a big one. I mean, I only focus on it for the area that I'm working in right now, which is New York. But I think if a passive house here in the summer hit a power outage, I think it would go for 2 or 3 days before it really started to get too hot. But hopefully we've shaded it right so it doesn't really get too heavy. In the winter, I don't even think I'd care if the power went out. I mean, I'd probably want hot water, but I just wouldn't know it. We don't even use the heat, so I think it kind of depends on where you are and what you are. But in terms of what we're designing for, we're only designing for a hotter climate. Period. We're assuming it's getting hotter. Everybody should. I think you'd be bananas not to right now. It doesn't matter what it is today. And I'm not saying that we can't solve this. I'm a positive person, but you might as well design for a little bit of heat. Anyway, let's
Got
go
it.
to the next one.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Alrighty, up next, I have Chris S. again, if you'd like to ask your question about ICF.
Yeah, thanks. I guess the main thing there is the cost or perceived cost of Passive House. What techniques do we have to bring that down? And I was wondering if maybe in select markets, ICF is a good way to do that. But you know, we used to do like barn raisings, right, as a cheap way to get the neighborhood together, and the talent threshold wasn't very high. So I'm not sure that's a great solution for Passive House. But one thing that doesn't seem to be used is, you know, everybody talks about costs as if you're going to sell the thing in a year. Well, no, let's talk about the total cost of ownership
Yeah.
over, you know, 1, 2, 3 decades, and then compare, you know, one to the other. But that just wasn't even like, that's maybe the 14th reason on your list or something. It just
Yeah, no, right back at you. Yeah, the total cost is super important.
cool.
Yeah, but just to come back to the two questions, one is ICF and foam in general, and then the other is cost of Passive House, which I saw in the chat came up a lot, which I'm asked about all the time. So first of all, I do high-end residential work. My clients were already buying custom windows. We were already probably buying a crazy amount of mechanicals, in-floor heating, blah, blah, blah. I can go on and I won't. I'm not doing any of that anymore. So for me, because I'm not doing that, when I take that stuff into consideration, the Passive House isn't really more expensive. It is if I have to go backwards, but the less expensive that renovation is, and the less you're dealing with a high-end Passive House, I think you're looking at a 5 or 10% increase in cost from what I'm told. I think if it was a tiny house, you'd be looking a lot, maybe a little bit more than that. And I just think that's a massive moving target. Has the contractor done it before? Do they have a mentor? Coming back to our community site that we're launching, I just think speed and not going backwards is so much of it. It just is. It's the biggest expense and it's the biggest reason people wouldn't do it. And there's just so many materials that are on the market and so many solutions. And then, I'm not the most knowledgeable person on foam, not foam. We try to use foam as little as possible on our projects, but sometimes they have a really good reason to use them in ICF. I totally get it. And it does its job. So I think that's kind of like a whole other session and debate. And it comes into, until we have something that works just as cheaply and quickly, maybe, maybe so you have to start looking at different things. So anyway, a whole other debate.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
And I just would add to that excellent answer, Michael, about multifamily buildings. So like with single family buildings, the range looks like it's probably somewhere in the 5 to 10% range. With multifamily buildings, it's less because it's easier to accomplish the energy performance of Passive House on a multifamily building than it is a single family building. So mileage will vary based on the climate, but in Massachusetts, there's a whole bunch of multifamily buildings, Passive House buildings that are coming online due to a really great progressive policy that's going on there. And the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center is tracking the incremental upfront cost of the new Passive House buildings and is seeing them at around 2 to 3% more expensive than conventional construction. So yeah, with multifamily, we're getting pretty darn close to cost parity with conventional construction, at least in climates like Massachusetts.
Yeah, and I'll add a little bit to that, at least in New York City, the Passive House projects, either whichever is the standards. Now that the state or the city are giving incentives. So if you're building too passive and getting it certified, you could apply for some of these grants. So you can actually get a good chunk of the money out that you've been putting in because of these incentives. And I think that's also spreading across the US, at least in the Northeast, that's more prevalent.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess it's also relevant to say that some of that increase is not really material cost. In my experience, has been the cost of the consultant and just how do you call it, the mental material that you're putting into the project to make it better. Some of that percentage has been part of that. So it's not really just material costs, but also the experience, like Michael mentioned. If the person has done it before, if there's precedent that you could follow, and taking from the cheat sheet for Michael is just, fully tried and true. Don't try to reinvent the wheel. Everything's already been laid out, so it doesn't have to be more. And I guess I have to take the next question, sorry. So we are going with the Kellerman, if it's still on the call. If he's not on the call, or she, I can take the question. I guess aside from the benefits of Passive House from an energy efficiency and comfort standpoint, what is the benefit to the client for getting Passive House certification?
I really feel like the certification helps you get it right. And it really does. And I can't underscore it enough. It really depends on how people are seeing the certifying bodies. And I mean, part of the issue here is I know the people who work there so well that I know who they are. And they're great and they know so much. And when you're in a project, no matter new build, renovation, especially renovation though, nothing goes the way you think it's going to go. And there's always that like monster hurdle and that scary moment. And so having a certifying body that you can contact, either FIAS or PHI, whoever it is, and they just see so many projects and they have really helped us get out of trouble. That's one. Two, I really think it's good to answer to somebody. I do. I don't do Passive House consulting in my office on purpose. I want to be checked before it's built. I want to be checked while we're designing. I think that check it's just so helpful. It makes sure you get it right. And as a client, you'd never know if they did. You'd have to just hopefully guess. So the extra expenses is really worth it.
Yeah, take out the greenwashing. You have
Yeah.
the seal of approval. There's no denying that one, right?
Yeah.
And that helps to your investment. I mean, in the
Yeah.
end, you have a seal that says, yes, this has been checked and tested, so
Yeah.
I can get my money's worth.
Alrighty. I think in this, for the sake of time, we should probably start wrapping up here. I'm just going to throw one more question to you, Michael, from Eric Reinhardt. So, Eric, if you are on, feel free to ask your question, and I'll just go ahead and remind people that there is going to be a recording of this, and so you can absolutely come back and you know, scratch that brain itch maybe if there's something you were thinking about missing, or feel free to connect with folks and follow up with some questions.
Hi, Mike. I put in two questions, but I think the first one I put in was about costs when you're dealing with an existing building. And that's sort of your specialty. So I was going to ask, how can you, what advice you would give to people who are fairly new to Passive House about making sure they can keep themselves in a budget, or really make the claim that they can pull off an airtight enclosure in an existing building.
Yeah, I mean, I think one is I can't stress how helpful it would be to have a mentor or have or use a community like this one to kind of bounce things off of. Chances are someone has done your building type before, and again, that's kind of, not that I'm trying to sell the community thing too much, but like it would have been so incredible if it existed when I started. And then just general advice, I'd given advice that's hard to take because you get kind of excited about doing a certified Passive House. I mean, some of these houses should not be certified. They should not get unbuilt that much. And there's no ROI for the earth or that building. You're taking out too much material and putting it all back again. All that trucking, all that material. You just got to see, what really is going to benefit that client for their health reasons, which, by the way, should be a reason by itself to do these things. We always talk about money, the monetary benefit, but there's also, I just say, massive, massive health benefit to living in a Passive House or being in a school that's or a retirement facility where you're spending all this time or an office building where you're spending all this time in these buildings. But some buildings, they're okay. They just need a lot of help. So maybe you're starting to look at what makes the most sense. If I'm redoing the roof anyway, maybe it's more insulation on the roof. If I don't have any fresh air in the building, maybe it's getting that right away. If I can just get some better windows and have them actually installed where, I mean, most of the leaks are coming around the window, not even through the window. I just think with the old houses that we're on, just being true to ourselves and thinking about it from the client's perspective, we want to make sure we do these buildings right because we're the last ones touching these things for the next 100 years. And we are in a climate emergency, but we also have to make sure that we're not fixing one thing where we shouldn't have been. That's again, where dealing with a Passive House planning package is helpful, or WIFI. It's helpful when you bring a Passive House consultant in. And then the other thing I'd say is when you're not fully going passive, I cannot tell you how important it is to have a Passive House consultant on, and finding Passive House consultants who want to do that kind of work as well. You can do damage to buildings by going halfway. You got to make sure you know where that moisture is coming in, where the dew point is. And there's just no reason to guess on it. So that would be my other piece of advice, is get a good partner in crime on that one. And we've been there. And it's just, it's the thing we're going to be dealing with all these existing buildings. And it's a great question.
Yeah, all great questions today. Great presentation, great points. Please, people take note, put them on your cheat sheet, print them on a Post-it, put it on your monitors, probably. Just before we wrap up, remember Component Spotlight with the Lamilux tomorrow. The link is in the chat, and please register so you can get the link. And with that, thank you all. We'll see you on the next one.